This is Optimized, a marketing performance podcast geared toward all things multifamily marketing. I'm your host, Janet Rosseth, a 25-year veteran in multifamily marketing and founder and CEO of Cadence Marketing Solutions. Optimizing is defined as making the best or most effective use of a situation, opportunity, process, or resource. My mission here is to bring you ideas, practices, and perspectives to help you optimize one conversation at a time with industry pros who influence multifamily marketing. You'll hear from founders, leaders, marketers, and operators who are breaking the barriers to achieve optimal performance in multifamily. This episode is brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network, delivering the latest news, ideas, and inspiration across the multifamily sector. Now, let's get into today's conversation. Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Optimized, a marketing performance podcast. I'm your host, Janet Rosseth, 25-year veteran of multifamily marketing. And here at Optimized, we're hoping to bring 1% better to your daily life or professional life, whether it's building more efficient work processes, uncovering meaningful data, or even uncovering new trends. I'm super excited today. We have Marc joining us from HelloData, and you can just go ahead and file this episode under all three optimized tactics because we are going to talk about efficient processes, we're uncovering new trends, and we're talking about meaningful data. So let's dig right into this episode. Marc, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on. So Marc Rudson, I'm the co-founder and CEO of HelloData.ai. We are an automated market survey and market analysis platform for multifamily. Basically, what we do is we go to well over 150,000 individual property websites and collect data every single day on what's leasing, at what price, what concessions are being offered, and use that, apply AI to it in a few unique ways to help you do market surveys, full, robust market surveys in less than a minute using our platform.
That's incredible. Less than a minute. I can hardly wait to dig into this, but I want to know a little bit more about your history. What led you down this path and to creating HelloData?
Well, so I was doing it myself back in the day. I started in real estate development and brokerage. And for 5 years, I was the one going to property websites and listing sites, cobbling together data and trying to use it to prove out market rents. And it just occurred to me, man, it's a lot of manual work. I think there's so many things in real estate that are very manual. This was just one that affected me personally. And I thought, man, we're doing all this. I'm personally doing all this work. And then, we take the data and make a subjective judgment on it to figure out, oh, maybe we should weight this comp more heavily or lean toward this to prove out rents. And I thought there had to be a better way. So
you were right. There had to be a more efficient way. I can feel your pain just talking to you, the years that I went through this process too in my role, and just how inefficient it was to pull the data and the likeliness of inaccuracies. I've always kind of said there's probably a 30% flaw rate, so we just hope it's flawed on all the same data.
Well, that's optimistic. Sometimes more, right?
I told you earlier, I'm an optimist. I always lean towards optimism.
Yeah, right. Likewise, to launch a startup, especially in this interest rate environment, you got to be an optimist, right?
Yes.
From there, I was doing it myself. I started learning tech and data science because I'm like, okay, I got to be able to build something to fix this for at least for myself, and then for other people that are going through the same thing. And so I ended up launching my first proptech startup called Enodo in 2016 to automate the exact work I was doing. To gather all this data, analyze it, and then help people prove out, if I do the granite countertops, the hardwood floor, the roof deck, how much more rent could I actually get for those amenities? And it was the time of the development wars, and a lot of people were upping the ante in terms of amenities, doing the dog washing stations, infinity pools, all kinds of crazy stuff. That did pretty well. We ended up, scouring a ton of data, built a really nice platform. And then we got an offer to sell the company to Walker & Dunlop. And so in 2019,
that had to have been pretty gratifying.
Oh man,
this little system you built to make your role more efficient gets purchased by someone extremely huge that clearly saw the value.
Oh, I did not expect an offer at that point. I'm like, all right, we're gonna have to raise more rounds. We're gonna have to grow and be, and they came in with a really great offer, and I'm like, okay, I'm 30 at the time. This sounds
You're
great. I
doing
didn't know
something
I'd get
right.
my exit right. um, so the really interesting thing that ultimately led to HelloData is, once I was on the other side of the fence, we built out tech that reduced their underwriting times by around 30% across the boards, helped them source a ton of different deals. It was a really great experience. I rose to chief product officer within a couple of years. And I was the one then on the other side of the fence, fielding the startups reaching out, trying to sell their data, and the different data providers selling us APIs and bulk data feeds. And I just saw the quality of the data that we're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for was just not there. We'd have to spend months working with that data to even use it. And I thought there has to be an opportunity. There has to be something we can do here to build a real estate data product. And that was kind of the impetus behind HelloData. And Tim and Nico, who were my first two hires in my first startup, and now they're my co-founders in HelloData. We last year decided, let's take the leap and let's build this thing. And that's kind of how it started.
What a rewarding path. And are you still just three people deep, or how many employees now?
We're up to 12 now. So
12. My gosh, that's
it's
still
been a
so
while.
lean
Oh, it's
and
so
running just this amazing product.
it's been a wild ride. I did not expect the growth to be what it has been, but we're, now we've got several million in revenue. We're profitable. We got really good margins, and we haven't raised a penny in venture capital the whole time. So like with the founders and the employees own the whole company. And that
Congratulations
has
on that.
been,
That's really incredible.
yeah, I appreciate it. That I think too many prop tech startups go right out of the gate. Let's raise a ton of money as much as we can. I don't think that's the right route, especially not today. You could do a lot more with a smaller team.
Yeah. And I mean, you are doing a lot with a smaller team. Can you give me an idea of how you're all broken out?
Yeah, so we've got like as far as like the team members,
Yeah.
we've got engineering. So Tim and Nico are both engineers and data scientists. So they run the engineering team, which is right now 4 people. So it's not too large, but that gets what we need to get done. I've been working with them for the better part of a decade. So I mean, we really understand each other's work, and we know how to build an efficient, scalable product. On the marketing side, we got Gavin, who joined us, who's kind of a jack of all trades, but really adept at digital marketing. And then on the sales team, now we have 3 salespeople that are helping me. I've done demos for so many different groups, and I realized that at a certain point, I got to take a step back and hire people to do all these different demos. We get a lot of inbound, so it's been great, but it's just
Yeah.
like one guy can't do it all at a certain point. And
Right.
then we got me
Especially
on
the
our
guy
customer
who's
success.
carrying the entrepreneurial hat and all the other directions as well, right?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, we all wear multiple hats, as you can imagine, being just 12 people, but I like it that way. It keeps it interesting. And so, I'm jumping into support chats here and there. I'm working on the Excel template, the export, and then I'm jumping into a sales call. So it keeps
Really
every
cool.
day pretty unique.
I love getting in with products like yours on ground level or about where you are, because there's something really, really cool about watching a product develop and knowing that the people that are behind the feedback, the sales process, and the development are still the founders.
Yeah,
You're still
that's
the one
that's
listening, you're still
important.
the one guiding, you're still the one building. It hasn't gone to a point where you're so far above the front lines that you don't hear all that anymore.
Well, we like it that way, and we want to keep it that way. So we've seen the opposite happen, where it becomes a game of telephone. You raise a round, you're like, I need to hire, let's staff up, and then you hire so many people that they haven't worked with each other that long. You hired them pretty fast, and then it's like the customer success person hears something on the front lines, and then they tell the salesperson. And the salesperson tells the product team, and the
Right.
product team says, "Hey, UI designer, help me out with this." And like by the time you actually develop the feature, you start to lose a little bit of like the why behind it. And we've
Correct.
just kept it so close that there's no game of telephone. we see on the front lines what people are going through, and then we fix the problem or build the feature right away. And I think people really appreciate that.
Oh, I'm sure they do. I know I would if I was in that boat as well. It's a differentiator, and let's talk about the competition in your marketplace. We don't have to necessarily name names, but there's some very, very big products out there that I know when I have feedback and I'm a user, it gets sent into some tiny support email address and not responded to for
Yep.
days, and then it's not even actually the question that I asked, and it's often products that are built for way bigger functions than what I need them for, and I'm trying really hard to make it fit. And it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily. So that's why I got so excited about HelloData and just the fun of being able to connect with you here on the podcast and share with listeners what you're capturing, what you're bringing to the market, and specifically for the optimized listeners, what you're bringing to the lives and well-being of marketers out there, because it's a challenging role. Much
Yeah.
like you just said, you're a small group and you just quadrupled in size. You've often got a 3 to 5 to maybe even one person marketing team out there for pretty large organizations. And for them to try to go and put together a marketing competitiveness report, or like you mentioned earlier, the ROI between a value add project on perhaps a new acquisition that's coming in, can take hours.
Yeah. Yep.
So I am thrilled with what you're bringing to the marketplace. But talk to me a little bit about the niche that you hoped to serve and how it's sort of infiltrated into more departments than just development.
Yeah. So we we kind of started off my background was in acquisitions and development, and I was analyzing deals, right? So I think of it like, oh, I could buy this deal and make money for my company or myself. So we started off kind of serving that, and it's just by virtue of like that's what I had done, and that's what the first startup did. And so I'm like, okay, let's focus on acquisitions people. So we built the product for them initially, but then it started to be that more and more operators came in, like multifamily operators, so property managers, asset managers, and that's a market I don't know as well. But we were hitting something at exactly the right time, and we started off wanting to build just a data product, right? So just like, hey, here's an API feed, you can pull our data, you can power your own internal applications. Turns out that's kind of hard to sell to real estate people. Not everyone can leverage an API or has a team to do that. So we built the interface for acquisitions people and people who wanted this data. And then we started to get more and more operators coming in. And then we realized what was happening. The whole market was shifting in a pretty big way. I don't know if you've been following the whole revenue management climate
Oh,
and the different
absolutely.
lawsuits. It has had a transformative impact. All of a sudden, whereas like 5 years ago, people were telling me, why can't you pull data directly from my property management software? Because we were scraping data at that point to build the first product. Like, why don't you get it direct from the source, pull all this data from everyone, and then put it in one place that they could analyze? It flipped completely, and everyone's like, don't touch our data in any way, shape, or form. We just want publicly available data. And so we leaned into market surveys, and then it started to take off. We got biggest owner in the country rolled out nationally. Then we got the biggest property manager, Graystar, rolled out across the board. We got the biggest developer. We started to get more and more groups, and then it's like a snowball effect. So the more people see someone using it, because we have these like email reports that go out, they're like, oh, someone forwarded me that email report. I'm interested to see what that is. I got to check that out. And then it just expanded through word of mouth. And I don't know if it's viral, but the growth has been pretty crazy, much
Well,
more
I
than we
think
expected.
you said it earlier too, that you started getting all this feedback and all this interaction and all this interest. And I imagine you started getting a lot of questions that we're investigating. Could you pull the type of data or reporting that isn't
Yeah,
available elsewhere? And, for example, from the marketer standpoint, It can be really challenging to break down your unit types. It's easy to pull one bedroom information or two bedroom information. But when you get to the point where you're trying to separate penthouses and townhomes and
Yeah,
build to rent single family homes or one plus dens or those oddities in those floor plan styles, it's really hard to dial in on those.
100%. Well, so we provided a solution to that using a couple pretty unique approaches. So one, when we collect the data, we go to two places. We go straight to property websites, over 150,000 of them. So we collect the data from the leasing page directly and from the banner on the website, the specials banner. It's like 1 month free if you move in by this date. We apply AI to the banner to extract the exact concession value. And then we track every day that leasing page. So we see each unit that leaves the market and at what price. And from that, we deduct the value of that, the dollar value of that concession to get to a really accurate net effective rent number that's updated every single day. And the level of granularity is the big difference because when everyone looks at the major providers, it's a starting point. You look at, okay, 30 days average rents are this. But then you're going to go to that leasing page on the website and see where are their actual units. By tracking every day, we're seeing this unit has unit level amenities being marketed as a corner unit, has a balcony, recently renovated. That matters a lot when you're valuing where you should
It
price
does.
the rent for that unit. So we capture that data and then we take it a step further. We actually go to the floor plan image and we use AI to pick out, even if they don't have any unit level amenities listed, we use AI to pick out this is a corner unit because it has glazing on both sides or on at least two sides. This has a washer and dryer in the unit because it's in the floor plan image. So even if they don't advertise it, we're catching that data and then we use that to recommend where you should price your rents. So that's
That's
a
so
big
incredible.
portion
I
of the
mean, the
platform.
amount of time that I've spent with clients that are developing new property or just acquired a property and they're onboarding it and trying to set that pricing can take, I mean, easily
So
hours.
hard.
If
Yeah.
you're good at what you do and you've done it enough times, you can, work it pretty quick, but it's kind of gut instinct, right? Like you're
Yeah.
measuring it from actually what's out there in the market. And I listen
Yeah.
to what you're just saying, and I see the flip side too. Like you're taking that API and you're taking the concession and you're taking the days on the market from a competitive standpoint in the market. But are you also then capturing the performance of that individual asset? So I might be looking at your reports and not just seeing competitive market information, but I can also see performance information on my individual property in terms of how many days did it take for that unit to
Mhm.
move and at
Yeah,
what
exactly.
concession or pricing did it go?
Exactly. So the way it works is real. We try to make it as simple as possible. There's no integration. There's no onboarding process. Really, you just get access to it, and people are like, "Oh, I logged in, but where? How do I load all my properties?" Like they actually ask this because
Right.
people
It
aren't
sounds
used to it
way too
being
good
this
to be true,
easy.
Mark.
They just type in the property name in a search field and press suggest comps, and then they have their market survey. And that's it. That's the process. And they're like, oh, what else do I have to do? Where do I enter data? There's nowhere to enter data. I
Pretty
think that has
incredible.
really resonated with people. It's confused people at first because they're not used to it. But once they see it, they're like, oh my God, I need to use this for the rest of my life to eliminate all that stuff I was doing manually before.
Right, right. I got really excited when we talked about the product prior to this podcast. The more you started talking about what the product was capable of doing, the more I was thinking in my head, like all the various uses, all the reports that I have not been able to pull because time simply doesn't allow. But
Yeah.
the information that you could capture or use to define your marketing strategy, just a complete game changer.
Yeah, we're getting so I know we started with acquisitions, then we went to asset and property managers, but we're starting to get more and more marketing teams interested too. And some of them have started to use our APIs, which you can pull all the data from our interface via API too. And some that are from more the scaled groups that have like a tech department are starting to leverage that data to inform like how they're advertising their units, how they're positioning themselves. They're using the data in bulk to do some of these really granular analyses. And that's what we originally intended. We wanted people to use it that way. We just had to build the UI because you can't just be like, hey, here's an API, you'll figure it out, right?
Right.
Some will, a lot need a visual representation.
I'm curious because, we often hear that, like you went in with the biggest guys in town first, the biggest users in the country first, but now you're starting to attract some of the smaller companies and smaller users that have smaller teams and are trying to do more with less. What are you hearing from them about the product?
Yeah, so I guess it's a little bit deceptive because we actually went for the smaller groups first. I mean, if you read like Clayton Christensen, like Crossing the Chasm, and how and there's another one that talks about like the tech adoption curve. I'm blanking on the name of it, but basically you you start off with the smaller end of the market because you can stub your toe 1,000 times, right? And there's enough breadth there that like, oh, they didn't like it. Okay, there's another person there. And you start to get the product better and better until the point where you start to get the big owners and operators, right? You have to work up to that. That's what we thought would happen. And when we first launched it, we're like, all right, we're going to make this good for the smaller groups and the mid-sized groups. Well, we kind of just leapfrogged that because we hit exactly the right thing for the bigger groups. So we kind of went backwards, right? Backwards from what we ever anticipated. But now that we're working with a lot of these mid-sized and smaller groups, I think one of the things we've realized is that when you go to a really small property, like sub 20 units, you have to add like more comps in because you might not have a lot of unit level comps. If you just say, hey, give me my top 5 comps, they may not have at least that many units in the time frame you're analyzing. So sometimes you have to broaden the pool. And so we've made it really easy to do. We added a button to suggest more comps. So people don't just suggest the first 10, they click it like 3 or 4 times and they've got 40 comps. Then you have plenty of unit level data, even if you're looking at a much smaller property with lower leasing velocity. So that's one of the things we noticed. We find that people like the export for a lot of different things, and it's really hard to get like detail on what they're doing in the export. But the more people you get, the more that they'll reach out to you and send you and say, hey, I keep doing this manually from your export. I export it and then I copy and paste this over here. Can you tweak the format a little bit so I can copy and paste more easily? And so we do that stuff. We try to do it as real time as possible. And we've started to get a lot more that are just coming in organically because they searched in Google and they found us or they heard about us somewhere and they just sign up right on the website. There's no onboarding process. They don't have to
word is
talk with
definitely
me.
traveling.
Yeah, I mean, I love to talk with people in the industry. I love to get do these demos, but you can also just sign up on your own. And I think having that organic sign up has really helped with the smaller end of the market. They don't always want to talk with somebody.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me, how does it perform on new developments in markets that I want to take this from 2 approaches: new development and market that hasn't seen a lot of new development. So your property has the majority of vacancy, and
Yep.
also new developments where the market is hot and there's a lot launching right now.
Yeah. So the way it works, you basically you put in your address, your number of units, when you're going to deliver it, some really high level info. And what the algorithm does is when we're doing a new development, it reaches a much broader pool of properties, everything that's similar, the first 50 most similar assets. So you're really broadening the reach there. And so it will work in a market where there's been a lot of development really nearby. And it will work in a market where there hasn't been a ton of development because it reaches further out. So when we source comps, we are looking at the year built, the number of units, the average square footage. Of course, we're looking at the standard things, but a really unique thing we do is we also look at the photos. We've got an algorithm that analyzes the photos and picks out about 30 different amenities and assesses the condition and quality of each room and common area. And so we're able to source comps way more effectively that way. Because like think about what you would do. If you were searching for comps, you would go filter by year built, number of units, radius, and then you look at the photos and say, oh, that's similar finish quality. So we do that automatically with the computer vision model. And at the end of the day, that helps us pick in that basket of 50 comps what is visually most similar, what's most similar in terms of vintage, in terms of the unit mix, in terms of the amenities. And from that broader pool, we look at the supply and demand attributes, like how quickly are different units leasing, what are the different sizes, what are the amenities, and we recommend a unit mix, we recommend an amenity package, and then we treat it as if that property exists today and generate a full
So
market
helpful.
survey. And I think the ease of doing that has been a game changer to a lot of people. But it also, once you spit it out, you've got your pricing recommendations as if it exists today. This is how we'd price it if it was stabilized. That
That's
is,
incredible. So,
yeah.
take, for example, a portfolio has a property that is partway through a renovation project. Partway through value add, they renovated a number of
Mhm.
units, but others are still what we call traditional or classic. And you've got two different pricing models going for the property. Typically, as a marketer, you'd be pulling a comp set that you just kind of hope works for both of them. But are you saying I could literally pull two different comp sets for this property? Classic
Yeah.
versus units that meet the same criteria and remodeled
Oh,
versus
yeah.
units that are similar in nature and price to that?
And I mean, that's the holy grail for a lot of acquisitions teams and marketers too,
Yes.
right? You want to renovate versus classic. How much more am I going to get if I put the next dollar into these units? Well, so our system does it in two ways. On the front end, when you source comps, there's a toggle. It's pretty straightforward. It's like almost deceptively simple. You just toggle value add before you say suggest comps. And then it will suggest the next level up in condition and quality using the data from the photos, right? So it's
Wow.
going to the next finish level and then recommending comps that are aiming for a $150 to $200 rent premium and another level up in condition and quality and surfaces those as comps. But then further, once you're in it, because we catch those unit level amenities, we look at the floor plan image, we look at the unit level amenities on the leasing page of the website and the floor plan name, which a lot of times will say like renovated two bed unit, right? Like we pick it up from all three places so that when you're in the interface, you can actually filter to only the renovated units or exclude all the renovated units and only look at classic. And that helps people understand that what that premium should be much, much faster than if they're doing it manually in Excel.
Right. What a time saver. The amount of time I've spent alone just out on websites combing photos, pulling them into a report for ownership. Oh,
Likewise.
just can't even imagine. I'm curious. I mean, you've built so much into this product and all the feedback you've captured, you've continued to develop more. Where does it ever end? Do you finish every day with a list of 27 more things you want to build into the product?
There's a point at which you can't continue to add features without making it harder to use. So we're very minimalist in things. So we got to a point where we responded to this feedback. We kept adding and adding and adding, and I'm like, guys, when I do the demos now, it's a lot to cover. And I think
Yeah.
people are starting to get overwhelmed. And so we go look at the usage in Mixpanel and LogRocket and we see, okay, barely any people are using this feature. We thought it was cool. People asked for it, but they're not really using it. Let's kill that feature and see if anyone asks for it back. And we've done that a bunch of times. And we've found that, if no one raises a hand and says, hey, I really wanted that, and you see the usage doesn't really change, right? Like when you
Yeah.
add it, like people aren't using it, get rid of it. Keep the system clean. And so, yes, there's always a list of 25, 30 more things people want, but like you gotta, and this is something that over the years I've gotten better at, you gotta get good at discerning how bad do they really want that? Is that like
Right.
a absolute nice to have? Like that'd be cool if you could do this. Or do they need that to do their job? And you always
Yeah.
prioritize the need first and then gradually get more and more of the nice to haves.
I love how much you're just seeing the evolution of the product too, and even approaching it from a what to start, what to stop, what to continue, rather than just continuing to add on at all times. How do you keep users?
up to speed on, someone that signed on a year ago? How do you keep them up to speed on what you've developed throughout the year?
Yeah. So we do three different things. So one, I post whenever we have a new like important feature. I'm going to post on LinkedIn. I've got part of our sales approach was to connect with a bunch of people on LinkedIn in our target market, invite them to follow our page, and then post regularly so that they're seeing kind of the journey, like able to follow the journey with us. And people really like that. So I actually reach a pretty broad audience by personally posting and then reposting back on the company page. Here's the update. We just added a feature to do this. Here's how it works. People really like that. Then I've been doing 1 to 2 email blasts a month to our client base and prospects that we've demoed for that haven't yet signed up. And I just keep them posted like, oh, we just hired a new person. We just, built this new feature. The export now has this. So that has been super helpful, and people like actually appreciate those emails. They want to see when new things come out. And then in the app itself, we use a platform called Intercom to provide support. And we've got on average under 2 minute response time to any request that comes in, which I think we talked a little bit about customer service before. I think that customer service in prop tech and generally in a lot of legacy tech is pretty bad. Like you shouldn't ask about something that's critical to doing your job and then wait a week to hear anything back. We
Right.
respond right away. And part of that is when you're in it, we see that you've logged in and we know there's a new feature. So it has a pop up. It's like, hey, did you know this is available? And it guides them through like a guided tour of the new feature. So those kind of three things: that post on LinkedIn, send the emails out, and then live in app pop up for a walkthrough of the new feature has kept people pretty up to speed, I'd say.
Very good. I'm curious, just from an entrepreneurial standpoint, talk to me a little bit about nailed it and failed it moments. I love hearing this
Yeah.
from fellow business owners and entrepreneurs. I think those out there who have not started a company and sloughed through the first few years don't always have an idea of what happens behind the scenes. But tell me a couple of moments where you nailed it and
Yeah.
where you failed it and had to pivot.
I'll go back to some of the lessons learned in the first startup. I'll start there, and then I'll try to think of something for HelloData here. But in the first startup, learned a lot by making a ton of mistakes, and
Fail
it's
forward,
very
right?
true. It's so much easier the second time around. I mean, it's not easy, but it's marginally easier because you've made those mistakes and learned from it. So, like the first time around, we thought of this cool concept called feature packages for units in your property. We're going to apply a feature package to the floor plan and allow you to test like this feature package versus this feature package. But like the UI to do that ended up being really complicated. And so people would like open the unit type and they're like, I want to make this a floor plan. I want to add amenities. No one used it. It was too complicated for anyone to use. But we spend a lot of time trying to optimize that, make it really usable. It just did not work. And so I learned from that, you can't introduce
Those
completely
moments can
new
be really
concept.
crushing, right?
Yeah, I mean, like we
You get
thought we
so
were gonna,
excited about something and put so much energy and teamwork
you
behind
know,
it.
it was one of those. And then we're like, why isn't anyone using it? They're not clicking the button. They're not, they're like, how do we get the price recommendations? I'm like, okay,
It sounds
here.
really cool.
Sounded cool, yeah. It sounded like a great approach, but you can't introduce too many like completely new concepts, especially if it's something that you have to work a long time to build. Bite-sized pieces, like, okay, here's a new concept. You can do just this one toggle, and now you can do the toggle, and it has a drop down, and you can configure it a little bit and incrementally build up to that new thing because people need time to acclimate with it. So I learned that was definitely a fail, a miss in the first one, and we learned a lot from it, and we don't make that kind of mistake again. This time around, we have been a lot more efficient with our capital, but we have made some mistakes. So like we hired early on salespeople that had no background in real estate with the idea that, okay, if the product is really good and understandable and it really is filling the need, we should be able to plug and play salespeople from different industries to help at this early point in our growth. Nah, you can't. Not in real estate tech. It just can't work that way. You need people with at least a little bit of background, or you
Right.
need the capacity to train them. And when you're a
We
team of
speak a
three,
language that can be hard to learn.
so many acronyms, so many industry specific things. And
Yes.
so we course corrected quickly on that. Unfortunately, we let the person go, and we backed away from doing that in other instances. But as far as wins, I mean, the biggest win is just that we were very averse to raising any sort of capital, because the first time around we raised a little over 2 million. And then there's that impetus to spend it. You got to spend it higher, scale, scale, scale. But what is scale? Scale is when you scale your customer base. And those
Yeah.
customers want to tell other people about it, and then you reach a broader market. So we really focus on product and on delivering that to people exactly where they needed to encounter it. Instead of raising money and building a big team, we did it with the smallest team possible. Like
That
the
must
Great
feel so
Start
rewarding.
rollout was 4 people. We have 4 people
Incredible.
to roll out to thousands and thousands of users nationwide. But we made it work because we automated everything. Instead of hiring, putting a button in a chair, we automated as much of the tedious work as possible. So we didn't need to hire, and we didn't need to raise. And I think that's the biggest win. Just
That's a
look for
huge
opportunities
win.
to automate.
That must be incredibly rewarding to know that you've done it at your own pace, on your own planning, without chasing that funding. And then, like you said, chasing the spending.
Yeah,
Where are
they
you
go
at in
together.
terms of forecasted growth? When you came
I
out of
think,
2024, we're recording this in the beginning of 2025. How'd you come
yeah.
out of 2024?
Well, I predicted, so last February, I was on a flight during my birthday going to a conference, and I'm like, oh, this kind of sucks. I have to go to this conference, but, everything's starting to pick up. So this was February of 24, and I'm like, I think if everything goes right, by February of 25, we're going to have 3 million in ARR, right? We're going to hit that figure. I'm like, we're going to do it. Everything's going to go right. And that was actually, I undershot it by almost a factor of 2. Like we almost doubled that estimate by already, like by
That's
Q4
incredible.
of last year, right? So we're well beyond. So now I'm like, okay, now if I estimate too aggressively to compensate, I'm like, okay, now I need to double whatever my estimate is. Now I'm going to miss it, I'm sure, for 25. It's going to go the other way. So we're trying to hit 10 million this year. I really think we can get to 15 or 20, but I'm putting a stake in the ground that if we get to 10 million within like the next 6 months here, we're going to absolutely kill it. Like that's still a growth story for the ages. And then from there, I think we get a lot further, but I don't want to put that stake in the ground. Be like, yeah, we're going to hit 20, and
Right.
then we come up short. I'd rather like set a lower bar and then jump
It
over
all
it.
comes with scaling, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
uh, it's crazy. But if
That's
you build a lot
incredibly
of
exciting growth.
automation,
Congratulations.
yeah, I appreciate it. It's been wild. It's just a lot of
I
work, but
bet.
it's rewarding for sure.
Yeah, well, you just covered my question on what's next on the horizon, what's next for predictions, but I'm curious, we talked a little bit about just what the product can do for what you've built that can give marketers and operators more of that efficiency and that access to data and just that ability to optimize the work that they do and the decisions they make. But I always have a little sweet spot for entrepreneurs and startups and let's talk to those listeners out there. What's your advice? You're a two-time startup, right?
hmm
What's your
for
advice to
people who
someone who's
want to
just getting started out and like, oh, when do you sleep? What's your advice?
First, it's listen to your customers, get in front of and talk with as many people as you possibly can, because you may think you have this great grand concept, but reality is there are probably other people that had similar concepts. There are probably other startups that launched with similar ideas, and didn't succeed, or maybe they did and you didn't know that they succeeded as much as they did. So talk with people, talk with other prop tech founders, talk with potential customers, and really vet that idea first. Understand every potential hole that could be poked in it. And you got to get to the point where you can describe it so succinctly and everyone's like, yes, I need that. That's exactly what I need. And then you go mock it up and then you get in front of them and they'll still poke holes in it. Do as much as you can to get it as polished as possible before you write one line of code. And that will get you it basically helps you avoid wasting very precious development time.
That listening is so important. And
Stuff.
would you also say it's just as important to listen and hear what you maybe didn't want to hear?
You got to be open to
Versus,
it. You
I
got to
think
be
to some
receptive.
degree, entrepreneurs can get so excited about what it is that they're trying to build that they really kind of want to ask questions and only hear what serves their vision.
Yep.
But sometimes
You
there's a lot
got
of
to hear
gray
the
area
negative.
there. And if you're not willing to hear it and listen to it, then you're moving forward 100 miles an hour on something that isn't necessarily going to land the way you want it to land.
Exactly. So many people do that. So many. And like I did it with certain things the first time around. This time I'm like, nope, I'm going to listen to what the customers want. I might have this grand idea, but let's figure out incrementally how to get there. And that has made a huge difference. And the other thing I'd say, at the beginning, when I launched the last one, I didn't know much at all about the startup world, right? I was just getting into it and I was trying to figure it out as I went. But at first, I kept stumbling on little things that I'm like, I feel like someone's encountered this before. So I started reading a book every week, like a startup book, a business book on technology, just trying to absorb as much as possible. And that helped me avoid a lot of things. I saw other fellow proptech founders making these mistakes. I'm like, wait, they wrote about that. There's a book about that mistake that you just made. You should read that so you don't make the mistake. There's no excuse for making a mistake that's already had like a book written about it to help people not make that mistake. And
Right.
you should absorb everything you can in
Just
the process.
surrounding yourself by that content. I mean, I'm impressed that you had the time to read the book.
I didn't.
I'm a startup as well, but more a consulting
Yeah.
agency than a prop tech. But I just became such a podcast junkie and listening to interviews of people who had started business before me or hit the point of needing to scale and how they made those decisions and what they learned from it. Or, I come from a marketing world, not accounting, and I'm running a business here. So surrounded myself with people that were smarter than me there. But there's so much access to content out there that I agree with you. That is an important piece of starting up is just don't go alone. Don't think you
Yeah.
have to figure it all out alone. Like there are so many people out there willing to guide from the side or mentor. And often it's
Mhm.
people like you and me, even who had access to someone like that as we were coming up. And now we like to
Yep.
give it back to people who are just starting where we were. Been there, done that, learned a few things, don't know it all by any means, but willing to
Oh,
help
it's
guide people towards some level of content to
yep.
help them there.
You got to give back too,
Yeah.
and I do. I never like. I guess I could pursue like advisor shares or something. I'm just like, hey, let's just chat about it. I don't. If you want to like pursue something down the line, like okay, we'll talk about it. But right now, I'll spend an hour talking with a new startup and just kind of
Yeah.
talk through what I've been through and see if I can help. And a lot of them have been really thankful for that.
Yeah. And I'm sure you learn a thing or two from them too.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't even know that that was a thing. That's a pretty cool idea.
Yes.
It keeps it interesting, you know.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been a fun conversation. I don't want to hog your entire afternoon, but I have one question that I always ask my guests, and I'm very curious from you, being a startup, being, pushing through into product development, being the, sales hat, all of it. How do you optimize personally? This whole podcast is about optimizing and bringing 1% better to your day and just waking up each day trying to do it just a little better than you did yesterday. How do you personally take on that challenge and wake up each morning with the energy to keep doing this over and over again?
So I think, I've built this into every fiber of the company and how I personally operate. I always look for things that I'm spending too much time doing, and I try to automate them. I'm like, if something is a repeatable note, step 1, step 2, step 3, you can automate that, or you can productize that task, right? You can write the steps out and then hire someone to do it a lot cheaper than you can. Just, hey, all you got to do, follow these steps in this order every time. That's the job. But there are products out there for almost everything. So I always look at, what is a thing I'm spending time on that I don't enjoy, that doesn't add as much value as other things, and how could I automate that? I've explained to everyone on the team that we should always look for this. And part of how we're able to scale as much as we have in clients across the board with such a small team is because we're automating all that stuff that really doesn't add value, that you're like, man, I hate this work. It's so manual. It's time consuming. And we just don't have to do as much of that as a typical size company does.
That's
and
brilliant.
so that's how
that.
I personally do it. That's how the company does too.
Have you automated things in your personal life that have become inefficient?
Oh yeah. So I'm like, okay, I end up, like, one example, I've got over to the left of me a wardrobe here. I'm like, man, I keep changing my depending on the meeting I'm going into. I need to grab a polo or a t-shirt or a hoodie or whatever. I'm like, I got to run upstairs to do that. I'll just have it right next to me. And so now I can just reach over and change clothes or whatnot. Or if I got to run out real quick, I've got like my suit and tie there. I can always put that on.
Smart.
So I'm like, okay, that's one little thing, save myself a little bit of time. But it's stuff like that I've done at home. I work from home, so it makes it a lot easier. Got rid of the commute altogether. Don't have to do that. But like, imagine if you just apply that philosophy to every little thing.
Yes.
It makes life so much more efficient. And then you're
straight out of Atomic Habits. Have you read that book?
Absolutely. Yep. I love Atomic Habits. Like, hey, I'm going out the door. I got to put my coffee there to remember to grab it. But yep, there's so many good books out there. I hope people take away that they should absorb all that.
Yes, agree. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was an excellent tip. For our listeners, where can they find and follow you?
Yeah, so head to HelloData.ai. It's all one word, HelloData.ai. And there is a 7-day free trial right on the website. So if you want to check out the software, you can do that. Or feel free to reach out to me at Marc, M-A-R-C, at HelloData.ai, and I'd love to talk.
All right, and follow you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely.
All your updates? Fantastic. Marc, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And to all of our listeners, you know the drill. We're hosted by the Multifamily Media Network. Tons of incredible content and hosts out there on their website. If you liked this episode, please follow, share it, leave a comment, and check out HelloData. I'm literally going to be going there right after we talk here because you said something earlier in the episode that I've got to go check out. Thank you so much, Marc.
Yeah,
Till next time, listeners, I hope you find that 1% better.
Thank you for taking the time today for this session. I hope you found a bit of inspiration and wisdom to optimize your performance. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. And remember, this podcast is proudly brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network, your trusted source for stories, trends, and insights in multifamily living. If you're a marketing influencer, be sure to check out Cadence Marketing Solutions at cadencems.com. We've made it our mission to support marketers and lead you to the voices, resources, and tools that impact your success in this fast-paced industry.